Listen, I've been recording galactic incidents for 300 cycles now, and I thought I'd seen every brand of stupid the universe had to offer. Boy, was I wrong. My name is Vorth9, Senior Analyst for the Intergalactic Wildlife Protection Agency, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you know about those bipedal maniacs we call humans. Trust me, after this tale, you'll either want to adopt one as a pet or launch them into the nearest black hole. There's really no middle ground with these creatures. It all started on Kepler 438b, a lush jungle planet that makes our homeworld look like a barren asteroid. The locals there, the Zelithians, had been dealing with what they called the Great Terror for months. Picture this: massive, striped predators the size of small shuttlecraft, with fangs that could puncture titanium and claws that made plasma cutters look like children's toys. The Zelithians called them Shadowstripes, but honestly, they looked exactly like the Earth creatures humans call tigers, just, well, about 10 times larger and infinitely more murderous. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The Zelithians, bless their four hearts, tried everything. Military strikes, energy barriers, sonic deterrence, even hiring those overpriced Korthak mercenaries. Nothing worked. These Shadowstripes just kept coming, and they were smart. Scary smart. They'd learned to avoid patrol routes, disable security systems, and worst of all, they'd started targeting the Zelithian nursery colonies. So naturally, the Zelithians did what any rational species would do. They called in the professionals. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force sent their best unit, led by Commander Thrix Alpha, a Vanguardian with combat experience spanning 7 systems, military-grade equipment, tactical support, the works. Want to know how that went? 3 days. 3 days, and half his unit was in the medical bay while the other half was requesting immediate transfer to literally anywhere else in the galaxy. The Shadowstripes had somehow figured out their communication frequencies and were anticipating every move. That's when someone, and I still don't know who, had the brilliant idea to contact Earth. "Let's ask the humans," they said. "What's the worst that could happen?" They said, "Oh, if only they knew." The response came back faster than anyone expected. One human. Just one. Not a military unit, not a team of specialists, not even someone with an impressive title. Just some guy named Jake Morrison who apparently ran something called Big Cat Rescue on Earth. I kid you not, when Jake's ship landed at the Zelithian capital spaceport, the entire Planetary Defense Council was there waiting. Picture 47 of the galaxy's most distinguished leaders, all expecting some kind of legendary warrior or master tactician to emerge. I kid you not. When Jake's ship landed at the Zelithian capital spaceport, the entire Planetary Defense Council was there waiting. Instead, out stepped this human, average height by their standards, wearing what appeared to be khaki-colored fabric coverings, carrying nothing but a small pack and wearing this ridiculously wide-brimmed hat. No weapons, no armor, no intimidating presence whatsoever. He looked like he was heading to a picnic, not a life-or-death mission against apex predators. The silence was deafening. I mean, you could hear someone's breathing apparatus 3 platforms away. Jake, completely oblivious to the stunned expressions around him, looked around and said, "Nice place. Bit humid, but the tigers probably love it." "Where are they exactly?" Chancellor Gorvek Prime, his translator struggling with what it assumed was a mispronunciation, corrected him. "You mean the Shadowstripes, the great terror that has plagued our world?" "Liveshane, to Todd Ragers D was perjul dajul." Jake tilted his head, squinting slightly. "Right, sure. Tiger-like predators causing problems. Got any cubs around?" And that's when everyone knew they'd made a terrible mistake. But here's the thing about humans. They don't give up easily. Even when faced with an entire planetary council looking at them like they've just volunteered for suicide duty, they just keep going. It's either admirable or completely insane, depending on your perspective. Within an hour, Jake was being escorted to the danger zone by a full military convoy. The Zelithian soldiers were convinced they were delivering this poor human to his doom, but protocol demanded they assist visiting consultants, even the obviously unqualified ones. The convoy stopped at what used to be the settlement of Bright Valley, now nothing but twisted metal and claw marks the size of hover cars. The Shadowstripes had been particularly thorough here. Jake stepped out of the transport and did something that made every Zelithian soldier's skin change to the pale yellow of extreme anxiety. He took off his hat, scratched his head, and started walking toward the jungle. "Sir, we strongly advise against," began Captain Yeth 7. "It's fine," Jake called over his shoulder. "I'll be back in a few hours. Keep the engines warm." And then he vanished into undergrowth that had claimed the lives of 23 trained warriors. The Zelithians waited and waited. 6 hours passed, then 12. The soldiers were taking bets on whether they'd find enough pieces to send back to Earth or if Jake had simply been vaporized entirely. Some of the more optimistic ones thought maybe he'd managed to climb a tree and was hiding up there too terrified to come down. That's when they heard it. At first it was just a low rumbling sound coming from deep in the jungle, the kind of sound that makes every prey species in the galaxy start looking for escape routes. But as it got closer, it became clear that it wasn't just one voice making that noise. It was several voices. And they weren't roaring in anger or hunting calls. They were purring. The undergrowth parted, and out stepped Jake Morrison, completely unharmed, still wearing that ridiculous hat, with the biggest grin on his face. But he wasn't alone. Behind him, walking like trained pets, were 3 Shadowstripes. Not adult ones, mind you, but juveniles. Each one was still larger than the Zelithian soldiers' combat vehicles, with eyes like molten gold and stripes that seemed to shift and move in the dappled sunlight. The soldiers immediately raised their weapons, but Jake held up a hand. "Easy there, folks. Meet Stripe, Patches, and Big Guy." He gestured to each of the massive predators in turn, as if he was introducing house cats. "They're orphans. Their mother was killed by the military bombardment last month." Captain Yeth-7's translator was making distressed beeping sounds, struggling to process this information. "Sir, those are the Great Terror, the unstoppable killers that have decimated our colonies." Jake looked genuinely confused. "These guys? They're just scared kids looking for their mom. Haven't you noticed they only attack when they feel threatened or when they're hungry?" The captain's skin shifted through several colors of bewilderment. "They kill everything they encounter." "Well, yeah," Jake shrugged. "Big cats tend to do that when they're starving and desperate. Basic animal behavior. They've probably never seen anything like your people before, so they default to treating everything as either prey or threat." He reached into his pack and pulled out what looked like a small device. The tiger cub's eyes immediately focused on it, and their purring got noticeably louder. "Sonic frequency matching," Jake explained, pressing a button. The device emitted a sound that made the Zelithian soldiers' hearing organs ache, but the cubs seemed to love it. "Mimics the call frequency their mother would have used. Took me about 4 hours to figure out the right pitch." One of the cubs, the one Jake had called Stripe, patted over and rubbed against his side. The human barely came up to the creature's shoulder, but he casually reached up and scratched behind its ears, like it was the most natural thing in the universe. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of several Zelithian soldiers fainting. "Right," Jake continued, seemingly unaware that he'd just shattered every assumption about human-predator relationships. "So here's the thing. These 3 aren't the problem. Their parents are." "Their parents?" Captain Yeth-7's voice cracked. "Oh yeah. Mama and Papa Shadowstripe are still out there and they are not happy. See, when you killed Mama's sister last month and then started bombing their territory, you basically declared war on the whole family group. They've been trying to rescue these cubs and get revenge ever since." Jake looked around at the stunned faces.
"Has no one on this planet ever dealt with pack predators before?"
"This is like basic zoology stuff." The captain's skin had gone completely white, which in Zelithian physiology usually meant either terror or imminent system shutdown. "You're saying," he managed, "that the attacks will continue until we reunite the family?"
Yay!
"Or find them a new territory where they won't bother anyone." Jake scratched Patches behind the ears, causing the massive predator to start a purring sound that vibrated through the ground. "These guys just want to be left alone with enough space to hunt and raise cubs. Pretty reasonable, if you ask me." That's when Big Guy decided to lie down next to Jake and roll over on his back, exposing a belly the size of a shuttle bay. Jake, without hesitation, started rubbing the creature's stomach. I swear, if I hadn't seen the surveillance footage myself, I would never have believed it. A human, barely the size of one of these predators' paws, casually giving belly rubs to what the entire Zelithian military considered an unstoppable killing machine. "The real question," Jake said, continuing the belly rubs while Big Guy's purring reached seismic levels, "is whether you folks are willing to work with the parents or if you want to keep fighting a war you can't win." Captain Yeth-7 looked at his remaining conscious soldiers, then at the 3 massive predators that were now playing with Jake like oversized house pets, then at his communication device. I need to contact the Chancellor immediately, he said. And that's when things got really interesting. But that, my friends, is where this part of the story ends. Trust me, what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about humans and their absolutely terrifying ability to make friends with things that should, by all logic, eat them alive. So there I was, frantically updating my incident report while simultaneously trying to convince my supervisor that, no, I hadn't been drinking fermented starfruit again, and yes, a human really had just turned 3 apex predators into oversized house cats. The emergency planetary council meeting that followed was, without question, the most entertaining political disaster I've witnessed in my entire career. And trust me, I once covered the Centaurian trade war where 2 species fought for 3 years over the proper way to fold napkins. Chancellor Gorvik Prime, his dignity hanging by a thread thinner than quantum string, called the session to order. Jake sat in the center of the vast chamber, still wearing that ridiculous hat, while Stripe, Patches, and Big Guy lounged around him like he was some sort of apex predator whisperer. The sight of 3 Shadowstripes casually napping in the galaxy's most secure governmental facility had caused 6 security alerts, 2 medical emergencies, and 1 janitor to quit on the spot. Mr. Morrison, the Chancellor began, his translator working overtime to maintain diplomatic protocols. You claim that peaceful coexistence with these creatures is possible. Jake looked up from where he was absently scratching Big Guy's ear. Oh, absolutely, but you're going about this all wrong. You can't just shoot your way out of a family dispute. Defense Minister Calth Omega bristled, his spines extending in agitation. Family dispute? These beasts have killed 47 civilians and destroyed 6 settlements. Yeah, because you killed their kid and bombed their house, Jake replied with the kind of casual bluntness that makes diplomats break out in stress rashes. What did you expect them to do? Send you a thank you card? The minister's spines went fully erect, a clear sign he was about to say something regrettable. But before he could respond, Jake's communication device started beeping. Oh, that's probably them now, Jake said, checking the device like he was answering a routine call. The entire council chamber went dead silent. Them? Chancellor Gorvik Prime whispered. The parents. I gave them this frequency. They should be here in about... Jake checked his timepiece, 10 minutes, give or take. If you've never seen an entire planetary government go into panic mode simultaneously, let me tell you, it's quite a sight. Alarms started blaring, security forces mobilized, and half the council members began evacuating toward the emergency bunkers. Jake, meanwhile, stood up and stretched like he'd just finished a light jog. Relax, everyone. They just want their cubs back. This is a good thing. A good thing? Defense Minister Calth Omega shrieked, his voice climbing several octaves. You've led the most dangerous predators on the planet directly to our capital. Led them, buddy. I didn't lead them anywhere. They've been tracking their cubs this whole time. You really thought 3 baby Shadowstripes could just wander off without mom and dad knowing exactly where they went. And that's when it hit everyone at once. The attacks hadn't been random. The Shadowstripes hadn't been mindlessly aggressive. They'd been systematically searching for their missing cubs while defending themselves against what they perceived as kidnappers. The ground began to vibrate with a low, rhythmic rumbling that every species in the galaxy instinctively recognizes as the approach of something very large and very unhappy. Through the chamber's massive viewing windows, 2 shapes emerged from the jungle canopy. And when I say large, I mean these adult Shadowstripes made their cubs look like house pets. Each one was easily the size of a frigate, with muscles that rippled beneath fur that seemed to absorb light itself. The male's roar shattered 3 windows and triggered every seismic sensor in a 50-kilometer radius. The female's answering call made the entire building sway on its foundations. Beautiful, Jake said, genuine admiration in his voice. Look at the size of those 2, absolutely magnificent specimens. Chancellor Gorvik Prime, huddled behind his reinforced podium, stared at Jake like he'd just declared his intention to juggle antimatter.
You find this beautiful?
Are you kidding me? When's the last time you saw predators this perfectly adapted to their environment? The muscle definition alone is incredible, and those markings. Each stripe pattern is completely unique, like fingerprints. The cubs, meanwhile, had woken up at the sound of their parents' calls and were making excited chittering noises that sounded like construction equipment having a conversation. Right? Jake said, clapping his hands together. Time for the family reunion. Everyone might want to step back a bit. Step back? Minister Calth Omega squeaked. They're going to kill us all. Only if you threaten their babies, Jake replied cheerfully.
Hey,
Just stay calm. Don't make sudden movements. And whatever you do, don't point any weapons at them. They interpret that as a direct threat to their cubs. Of course, that was the exact moment when Captain Yeth 7 and his security team burst into the chamber, plasma rifles raised and ready to fire. The adult Shadowstripes' reaction was immediate and terrifying. Both parents went into full defensive mode, hackles raised, fangs bared, their roars shaking dust from the ceiling. The cubs scrambled behind Jake, who suddenly looked very small and very human in the face of two absolutely furious apex predators. "Nobody move," Jake shouted, spreading his arms wide. "Security, lower your weapons now." "Are you insane?" Captain Yeth 7 yelled back. "Those things will tear you apart. Only if you give them a reason to." Jake turned toward the adult Shadowstripes and began making a series of soft, rhythmic sounds that somehow managed to cut through their aggressive posturing. What happened next will haunt my dreams and simultaneously restore my faith in the universe's capacity for surprises. The massive male Shadowstripe, Leas, this creature that had single-handedly destroyed an entire military base, stopped roaring. His ears twitched forward, and he tilted his head in what could only be described as curiosity. Jake continued making the soft sounds, slowly reaching into his pack for the sonic device. When the familiar frequency filled the chamber, both adult Shadowstripes visibly relaxed. "That's it," Jake murmured, taking a step forward. "Just here for the kids, right? Nobody wants to fight." The female Shadowstripe padded closer, her massive head lowering to sniff at Jake. For a moment that lasted approximately 17 eternities, predator and human stared at each other. Then she did something that made every xenobiologist in the galaxy simultaneously resign and apply for new careers. She licked him. One gentle swipe of a tongue the size of a hoverboard, and Jake Morrison became the first human in recorded history to receive what could only be called an approval kiss from a creature capable of swallowing shuttles whole. "Good girl," Jake said, scratching behind her ears exactly like he'd done with the cubs. "Just wanted your babies back, didn't you?" The three cubs bounded over to their parents, and the reunion that followed was simultaneously heartwarming and absolutely terrifying. Imagine the sound of several freight trains purring in harmony, while creatures the size of buildings nuzzled each other. Chancellor Gorvek Prime, finally emerging from behind his podium, stared at the scene with the expression of someone whose entire worldview had just been turned inside out and set on fire. "But how?" he managed. Jake looked up from where he was now, somehow petting all 5 Shadowstripes at once.
Communication.
"They're intelligent, social creatures with complex family structures. They don't want to fight any more than you do. They just want their territory, their cubs, and to be left alone. But the attacks, the destroyed settlements, rescue missions," Jake explained. "They were looking for their cubs and defending themselves from what they saw as continued aggression. Every time your military showed up, it reinforced their belief that you were the kidnappers." The male Shadowstripe padded over to Jake and did something that made every security camera in the building simultaneously malfunction from sheer impossibility. He rolled over and presented his belly for scratches. Jake, without hesitation, began rubbing the creature's stomach, which required him to basically climb onto a furry surface the size of a landing pad. "The solution is simple," Jake called out, his voice slightly muffled. "Give them the territory they need, stop encroaching on their hunting grounds, and they'll leave your settlements alone. Basic conservation principles." Defense Minister Calth Omega found his voice. "You're suggesting we negotiate with predators?" "I'm suggesting you negotiate with intelligent beings who happen to be predators. There's a difference." And that's exactly what happened. Over the next 3 days, Jake Morrison facilitated the first interspecies peace treaty between the Zelithian government and a family of apex predators. The Shadowstripes got a protected territory the size of a small continent with guaranteed hunting rights and a promise that no military operations would be conducted in their space. The Zelithians got their settlements back, along with an early warning system. Anytime they needed to expand or conduct operations near Shadowstripe territory, Jake had taught them how to use the sonic communication system to request permission. But here's the part that still makes me laugh until my respiratory organs hurt. On his last day on Kepler 438b, Jake was saying goodbye to his new friends when Big Guy decided to show his appreciation. The massive cub picked Jake up by the back of his shirt, as gently as possible, and carried him around like a trophy. Jake, dangling from the jaws of a creature that could bite him in half without trying, was laughing and taking pictures with a small recording device. "This is the best vacation ever," he called out to the assembled crowd of still traumatized government officials. When Big Guy finally set him down, Jake gave each of the Shadowstripes one final belly rub and head scratch, promised to visit again, and walked back to his ship like he'd just finished a routine consultation. The Zelithians offered him a permanent position as Interspecies Communication Specialist, with a salary that would make most Galactic CEOs weep with envy. Jake turned it down.
Thanks. But I've got 12 more rescues lined up back on Earth.
Besides, you guys don't need me anymore. You've got the communication protocols. You know their behavioral patterns, and most importantly, you know they're not monsters. They're just really big cats who want the same things every parent wants: safety for their kids and a place to call home. As his ship lifted off, the entire Shadowstripe family came to the edge of the jungle to watch him leave. Their farewell roars could be heard from orbit. The epilogue to this story is that the Shadowstripe territory has become one of the most successful conservation programs in galactic history. The Zelithians now run guided tours, and Shadowstripe watching has become a major tourist industry. Jake Morrison went back to Earth and continued running his little animal rescue organization, completely unaware that he'd just solved a crisis that had baffled 3 different galactic military organizations. And me? I got promoted to Senior Xenobiological Incident Analyst specifically because my superiors decided that if I could accurately report something this impossible, I was clearly qualified to handle anything the universe could throw at us. They were wrong, of course. Last week I had to write a report about a human who apparently taught a hive mind of crystalline entities how to play something called poker. But that's another story entirely. The moral of this tale, if there is one, is simple. Never underestimate a human's ability to make friends with things that should, by all logical standards, eat them for breakfast. And always listen when they say it's just a big cat. 'Cause they're probably right.